Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream I do a couple of times every week, where it's an interactive Q&A. So I'm here purely to answer your questions. I really have no agenda to speak of. I'm here just to answer anything that people want. If you are seeing my face and you're on some kind of a device, whether it's a computer or a phone or a tablet or a TV or anything like that, I think everything except for the TV, you should be able to see a chat box somewhere near the video feed, presumably under it or next to it. Get in the chat. If you are a subscriber to my channel and have been for any amount of time, you should be able to get in the chat and ask me questions. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out if I possibly can. That's the whole point. The title of today's episode is Hiring has Changed. Most job seekers haven't. And this is episode number 97 of Honest HR Nitrous. We've done 97 of these. So, get in the chat. We could talk about that. I will start out by talking about that and we'll see where it goes. But I'm basically looking for your participation. And as always, a special shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. Membership has the privileges, and my super thanks donors, my Patreons, and of course to you, my participants and my viewers. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's get into this. So hiring has changed. Most job seekers haven't. There's a lot that has changed in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 2 years of hiring, definitely. And there's a lot of things that have stayed the same. So among the biggest things that have changed, obviously, like you guys probably know, is AI, right? And what this means is that, when you are applying for a lot of jobs, at least posted jobs, same as always, you're going to get filtered a lot. Same as always, the posted job market is highly oversaturated, even though it contains about 20% of the jobs that are out there. Something like 80% of all the applicants are looking there. So, there's a lot of competition for those jobs. So you're going in with hundreds of applicants a lot of times, and you're encountering an ATS filter, applicant tracking software, that reads your resume automatically. So it's like a computer filter that reads your resume automatically and ranks it for the recruiter, right? Now, they've had these ATS filters for a long time. What we're seeing increasingly is that they're using AI technology to help with doing it. It just makes them more effective at what they're doing and what they're supposed to do, which is to filter out certain things and look for matches and things like this and present that to the recruiter. So if you're playing this game, that's the name of the game, is to basically get past the ATS filters and get ranked towards the top so that the recruiter actually looks at your resume with their own eyes. That's the goal of this, and then to be shortlisted for an interview. That's the idea. So because those kinds of AI tools are being used on the back end for the recruiter, it makes a lot of sense for a lot of candidates to also be using the AI tools to work for them and to try and outmaneuver the ATS software, right, or the ATS system. So that's the idea. Now that's been a relatively recent development in the last couple of years. That's really come to prominence. The other big thing that we've seen is the rise of fake jobs, right? Fake job posting. Those have always been around, but for some reason they're on the rise. And there's a lot of interesting things that have been happening recently with that stuff. For example, in the United States, they've had that kerfuffle with the employment numbers have been restated, and they were found to be a lot less than what they were presumed to be, or they were estimated to be originally. And then going hand in hand with that is another sort of surge in fake job postings. So, I think the two are definitely related. I think it's more than just a complete coincidence that's what's going on. So that's some of the stuff that changed. So being able to detect fake job postings is becoming increasingly important because we're now seeing 30% or over 30% of job postings being fake job postings. Like there's no actual job at the end of it. So that means that if you're just applying to everything and you're putting a lot of work and effort into it, and a lot of your posts that your jobs that you're applying to are fake jobs, it's a huge sap on your resources too as a candidate. Not to mention the fact that some fake jobs are they're scams basically. So you've got to be on your guard against that. It's not a question of productivity; it's a question of safety, right? So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you would get into this and be more tuned into it. So that's the idea. This is what we're seeing. Alpipal is here. Hello, Alpipal. Alpipal says the 80-20 rule. Yeah, I've heard that a bunch of times in many different contexts, the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule means a different thing in each context. So that's the deal. Yeah, but that's definitely the reality. It has been for a very long time. Most jobs are not posted. They're in the hidden job market. And 80% of the jobs are in the hidden job market, 20% are in the posted job market. It's actually less, I suspect. In my experience, it's been less. But like every job I've gotten for the second half of my career, for sure, has been in the hidden job market. And so that's where things are. That's where you need to be tuned into. I don't care if you're an introvert. I don't care if you're nobody. You've just moved to a new city or region or whatever. You don't know anyone there. You can access the hidden job market. Everybody can. It just means that you're not doing an internet search for job postings. So that's something we can get into if people want me to talk about that. If this is all new to you. And once again, as I always say, don't take my word for stuff. Go out, do your own research. You'll see it's true. And, we can do that. Alpipel says, can we talk about drop shipping? Why would we talk about drop shipping? This is about looking for jobs. Drop shipping, as I understand it, is this slightly sort of trendy kind of thing that people did a couple of years ago to start like one-person businesses and side hustles. And it's not a particularly good model. It's just something that it's almost like arbitrage. People exploit a little bit of a loophole, but it's something that ultimately doesn't add a lot of value to customers, and therefore it's not great, and it therefore also doesn't really succeed, especially now this is a known thing. So, it's basically where a company is outsourcing their marketing to you. Like, you rely on their sales and distribution, operation, but you're essentially doing the promotion for them, right? So you get a cut. So to be kind, you could look at it that way and say, okay, you're providing a service, but that's my understanding of it. I don't think it's a particularly legitimate business model, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. I don't think we're here to talk about jobs now. So yeah. So anyway, that's the deal. So hiring has changed quite a bit, and also, there's been a whole bunch of sort of trends that have like continued their course, in the last bit, and companies are looking for ways of making their hiring process even more efficient. This is the thing. They evaluate the recruitment and selection department of the HR function in terms of efficiency. And what that means is how much time and therefore money has it cost to find an acceptable candidate and place them into a job and onboard them, right? That's the metric that they're used. Now, the problem is that the way I see it, and this has always been the problem, HR can be quite bad at their job, actually. They could place candidates that are really not the greatest candidate. They're not suited to that job in absolute terms. And that would go virtually undetected, right? Because if there's a problem with that employee, the problem leaves after the employee leaves after 6 months or something. They don't perform very well and then they leave, right? The problem is like, okay, what caused that employee to underperform and then to leave? And it's even money. You've got two departments doing this. You've got the manager of that employee saying, oh, the HR department hired the wrong person, right? And then you've got the HR department pointing the finger at the manager and saying that was a perfectly good employee, but if they were dissatisfied in their role, it's because they were mistreated by the manager or possibly their peers, and that's why they left, right? So it wasn't our fault. We found you the right person. You drove them away, right? So that's why you can't really get any meaningful statistics, or at least accountants can't, when they monitor this, right? So at the end of the day, it becomes a thing where like HR is evaluated on the efficiency of how little time it takes to place an employee, right? This is the problem. And as a result, they put less and less work into these things and more judgments based off stereotypes and statistical probability rather than evaluating the candidate that's in front of them and really getting to know them, right? So this is a known issue. This has been going on for a very long time. And so as we go into the future, one of the trends is that they're trying to put even less work into placing a candidate. So that's where we've seen, I forget what you call it. Maybe you guys know. It's where you go to a website and you're doing almost a job interview, but into your camera, and they're recording your answers to questions. They're like, recording the video of you answering the questions, and it's not in real time. It's not like you're on a video call where they're watching this. It's that they're recording the video and then they can watch it later if they choose. That's the idea. So you're not even getting that real-time kind of interview experience, even remotely. You know what I mean? They're really trying to push for this. And finally, the job market and employees are finally pushing back and saying, like, no, I'm not doing this. I may need a job, but I'm not doing that, So there you go. Mehmet, what should be my strategy? Okay, well, if that's like a job fair you're describing, right, where usually, a lot of employers attend and they have like a booth or equivalent, right? And then they'll have at least one, usually more representatives, usually a lower level employee, right, that mans the booth. And the idea is that schools put this on for their students. And it's for usually for students getting their first career-related job after school, right? After they complete their education. So that's what it's geared towards. That's what everybody, is tailoring this experience to. So the idea is that you go there, you can bring a stack of resumes, you could bring a stack of business cards. I would recommend that you get your own business card made up. It's like for the equivalent of literally $20, you can get a huge stack of business cards, right? And if you have a LinkedIn profile, you're essentially putting the header of your LinkedIn you're essentially putting that on a business card, okay? So it says your name. It would say Bill, former CEO, and then my phone number, email address, maybe social media, like LinkedIn or something, and it would have my picture. I recommend doing that. It's the idea is that when you talk to somebody, like I have a shirt, I have business shirts, and they have a breast pocket, like a chest pocket, and I put business cards in here, as a default. And I take it out and I give it to people, right? When I talk to them, and the idea is that it's a cue for them to give you your business card, to give you their business card, right? So you give them yours, and then they give you theirs, and then you have a business card. So you have a record of who you spoke to. They're this person from this company. Here's their phone number. Here's their email. Here's their LinkedIn, right? And it just has a memory jog. Here's their photo, like a nice, sort of headshot, of who this person was. And you go, oh yeah, I remember them, right? So you don't have to keep track of people. And then it's great for if you want to follow up with somebody. So say you go down to the job fair and you go to, there's a company with its booth, right? You go up to the booth and you say, hey, so what's going on? I understand you guys operate in this region, and I can see you do something to do with I don't know, hydroelectricity or whatever. And they say, yeah. They go into their pitch. Yes, we employ this many people, and we're always looking for young people that have skills in this and this, and mainly in this area, but we have others, and we're a great employer. We offer these benefits, whatever, right? And you say, oh, that's really interesting because I studied that. I also have an interest in this, and I didn't know that business is so prominent here, and blah blah, like that kind of stuff. You have a conversation about it, and then anyway, when you're done, they have your business card, you have theirs, and then the idea is that you could then go off and just sort of apply to the company, right? That's kind of the default thing, but you could go beyond that, and you could follow up with the person you met. And say, like, for example, I noticed that you guys have a job posted on your website. Does it make sense for me to apply for that? Like that kind of thing. So you say, hey, we spoke. Remember, I don't know if you recall, we spoke for a few minutes at the job fair last week, and you were telling me about this, and I noticed that you have a job posted on your website. Now I have a background in this. Does it make sense for me to apply? And you're asking almost rhetorically because you know that it makes sense for you to apply. You just have them say, yeah, we're looking for people with those skills. You say, okay, great. So now you're going in, but you have like a connection, and you can even put on your cover letter, like, I met this person and they recommended that I apply for this since I have this, and this, stuff like that. So, I mean, it's like a way in for that. It also can be possibly a way to tap the hidden job market if there's stuff that might be coming up that they haven't posted yet. You could sort of get in there, or you could like have networking opportunities and say, like, I'm interested in working in this department. Do you know, like, who would be the appropriate manager of that department that I could perhaps reach out to? And then once they give you their name, you could like look them up on LinkedIn and then reach out to them. So there's a whole variety of things you can do, but I would consider making up some business cards. Like $20 gets you a giant stack of them. I used to order them years ago from a place called Vistaprint, but there's many places that will do them for you. You can also bring a stack of your resumes, like printed out, hard copies. There's more modern things, right, with QR codes and all that, but it sometimes is nice to get like just a hard copy. This is the person. And you hand those out, if and when appropriate. Okay, so like that should get you started. That's kind of how you operate. You just lather, rinse, repeat. You do that to like as many of the employers as you can when you're there. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that was Mehmet. Alpipal says, I've been thinking about this. Do some recruiters or employers ignore your application for a belief? I've heard that adding pronouns on your resume automatically gets you ignored. Yeah, that goes into like political stuff. I don't go into that area. Look, some people are into that stuff. Some people aren't. Follow your bliss, is all I would say. Alpipal says, I've also heard that a YouTuber said he got fired from a forestry job because of literally one thing he said on YouTube. That's pretty messed up. Listen, Alpipal, okay, let me give you, you may know this already, but let me remind you, engage some critical thinking skills, okay? You're mentioning one data point. One person said this one time. Are you going to then go and change all your behavior based on like, you heard that one person said something one time about this? No, you wouldn't, right? Now, maybe if you keep hearing that over and over again from independent sources, all saying kind of the similar type thing, then maybe there's something in it that you might want to investigate, okay? But just like this type of thinking, saying, oh, I heard this, I can guarantee you on YouTube or on a lot of social media and on the internet in general, there's somebody saying any possible thing you can imagine. Like, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how wrong, there's somebody like telling you that, like, oh yeah, this is a thing, think for yourself, like, okay, take that under advisement. That's interesting. But it's one data point, and it's a person you don't know, and you have no evidence that it's even correct, right? So, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not enough to even worry about, you know? Now, if you come back to me and you said, listen, in the last week, I've heard like several people, both on YouTube, in real life, and, you know, at, you know, friends and family, they're telling me the same thing, that this is happening out there. I'm worried, you know. Now, I've looked it up, and it seems like I've looked it up on ChatGPT and on Google, and there seems to be a lot of people saying that this is a thing. What do you think? You know, like that would be a more intelligent way of approaching it, in my opinion. Okay. Are you in the forestry business? I don't know what the forestry thing is. And once again, I mean, you can't answer this because it depends what they said. You know, I'm sure there's stuff I could say right now that would end my, you know, time on YouTube. You know, just like, you know, when I was a executive, when I was even a manager or even a supervisor, there's some things you could say that would probably get you fired immediately. You know what I mean? You know, and it might ruin your reputation when you try and get another job in that industry or in that region or something. You know what I mean? So yes, there are things you can do. In fact, like, I'm sure nobody cares about this, but going into executive management, that's a big deal. You have to be very guarded, very safe, because you're always on. You're not just like keeping your job, you're representing your organization, you know, very real. You can't let anything slip, you know, and I found that particularly challenging. I didn't mess up in a big way, but I found that very, very stressful, always being on. Now that I'm on YouTube, every year I'm on YouTube, I just loosen the reins a little bit more, you know, and keep it a little bit more real. You know, but yes, you could definitely cross the line and do that. BX says, a great resume doesn't always mean a great fit. You need chemistry. Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't argue with that. Helicopter says, good day, mates. Good eye. You call that a knife? That kind of thing? Australia. Mehmet says, this fair is for not dedicated for students and jobs. What? This fair is for not dedicated for students and jobs. Excuse me for not specifying. It's for general networking where CEOs are also present. Okay. Is that a great use of CEOs' time? Like if they're giving keynotes or whatever, maybe. Is that kind of the idea? Okay. So it's not like a job fair. It's just a networking event. Okay, so you'll have to explain to me, are there booths? Like you said, there's students there, but there's also CEOs. So that usually you don't get that unless CEOs are giving a keynote presentation, you know, of some kind as an event there. And usually it's a paid thing. They go there, they talk, and then they bugger off. Maybe answer some questions. I've done that stuff. So if that's what it is, it depends what the nature of the event is. Like, is it some kind of just networking event? Is it a fundraiser? Is it like, you know, awards show? Is it, you know, like there's all kinds of different things. But basically, if it's like a sort of wine and cheese kind of party, which is things I've gone to, where they organize these, that's the domain of like a lot of extroverts. A lot of extroverts like that, where you schmooze. There's a room with 100 people in it. Go, you know, and some people think that's awesome. They'll love that. The problem I have with that is that if there's 100 people in a room and you've got an hour, you maybe talk to about 5 of them. At least I do, because I want to go in depth. I don't want to be, hey, hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? You know, that kind of stuff, right? I find it very inefficient for really connecting with people, honestly. So I'm not really part of that. You know, that's not really my thing. But what you can do is, if you're just sort of making small talk with people, is always remember, like, go up, first of all, basic stuff, like be very polite. It's not about you, it's about them. So go up and ask people about them. Don't go up to someone and like talk all about yourself. I do this, I do that, blah, blah, blah. You might think that like, okay, if I'm trying to get a job, I need to do that. I need to promote myself. I need to pitch, hey, it's good to meet you. Did you know that I can do this? It's like, no, that's not really the approach. The approach, if you're dealing with managers or like someone who could be a hiring manager or somebody that could influence you getting a job, you want to do the opposite. You want to make them love you and really like you. And the way to do that is if you're strangers, is you go up to them and you ask them about them, So you start with some kind of an icebreaker, and an icebreaker is something that you both have in common. So for example, you could say like, could you hear anything in that last speech? Could you hear a word of what they were saying? I couldn't hear anything, because you share that in common. You were both here, presumably for this speech or whatever. So you have something to talk about, right? And the other person says like, no, like actually I couldn't hear a word of it. You're like, exactly, they need to turn the microphone up, or something like that. It's like, hey, it's good to meet you. I'm Bill. Something like that. Like you start with the icebreaker, you introduce, and then you ask them about them. So what do you do? What are you here for? And then they say, oh, I'm here for this. And then you ask questions. Oh, how does that work? I never heard of that before. What do you do? That kind of stuff. It's all about asking them questions. And they get to talk all about themselves to someone that they believe is interested. Hopefully you are interested, but whether you are or not, you want to make it feel like you're interested. And they'll enjoy interacting with you, right? It's very flattering to have people come up and do that to you. So that's like the Cliff's Notes. That's like the short version. Okay. So if you're trying to make conversation with people, that's like a great sort of template. Alpipal, is the customer always right? Yes. But that's another cliche, right? So we're talking cliches. It also reminds me of all your YouTube videos of how there are so many trap questions in interviews. It was the context, how you lose a good thing for a trivial thing. It's the name of the game, I guess. Well, I mean, like, listen, if you're talking to somebody that you don't know, either in a job interview or any other thing where they're like evaluating you, and you drop like a highly racist comment or bigoted comment or something offensive, like just, obviously that can instantly kill whatever you're trying to go for. Like that, yes, that's a thing, and it does happen, and you got to watch for that. Just like in a job interview, they're trying to find out who you are. They're skeptical. That's the idea. You give this pitch like you're awesome. I'm the perfect person you should hire. I have no faults, and I'm your perfect employee, your dream come true, for like an employee. And they go, okay, well, we'll see about that, right? And then they ask you probing questions to kind of poke holes in that, right? That's the idea, right? And sometimes it's pretty easy. They ask some person like one question, what do you think about this? And then they spill the beans. Oh yeah, I hate those effing people. They can't do anything right. Do you know that I once got fired because of one effing jerk that did that? It's like, okay, you're done. You're eliminated right there. You could be like this brilliant person, but like that was a deal breaker. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how it goes. And what they've been doing in job interviews is like, remember what I said, if you were here for the very beginning of this, I was talking about how the title of this was like, hiring has changed, most job seekers haven't. One of the things that they're pushing even further is trying to amplify the efficiency for placing people into a job, meaning that they want to spend even less time evaluating candidates, but yet somehow selecting the best one and then onboarding them and then, getting them to be productive in a role. Like they want to shorten that time. And so it's less time, less effort, right? We were talking about that at the beginning, right? So the exchange you have with like a recruiter or whatever, or anyone interviewing you for a job, if it's like a formal thing, they ask questions that are like engineered to like try and find problems quickly, right? Like a lot of trap questions. You know, does this person really care about doing this job? Let's see. Let's ask that question. And if they answer with anything other than this, okay, then that's a fail, right? So like that's almost like a concentrated form of this, right? Okay, so that answers your question. Okay, good. Bug 5654 says, for sales jobs, I'm assuming the basics stay the same, but where do sales jobs depart from the more traditional job searching methods? Thanks in advance. Well, okay, now full disclosure, I didn't come up through sales. I've managed sales teams, but I haven't done a lot of like job interviews for salespeople, okay? The stuff that I've done for that, we didn't hire people based on like an interview. We hired people based on like who's like got a track record of success. Let's get them, you know, let's see what it would take to get them, you know, so you're starting with that. You're not really interviewing a total stranger and then trying to like probe to see who they are. It's like we already kind of know professionally who they are. We know they're good. It's a more practical problem, which is like, you know, can we lure you over to work for us? You know, that kind of thing. So in addition to asking about background and stuff like that, so I don't have a ton of personal experience doing that, but the idea is that like for sales jobs, what they do is sales is like one of those areas of high uncertainty, right? Legal is another area, right? You know, this belief that like, you know, say you work in a factory and you work on an assembly line. When they're interviewing people for jobs, like HR kind of believes that like people are fungible. A person is as good as a person is as good as a person. As long as we get somebody, as long as they're not an axe murderer, they're not crazy, and they're not like, you know, lying about everything on their resume, then like, you know, one is as good as the other. It really doesn't matter who we get as long as, you know, they're all about the same, right? But in areas of higher uncertainty like sales or like legal advice, they don't agree with that. It's not like, oh, a lawyer is the same as a lawyer is the same as a lawyer. Who's cheapest? It's like, that's not how they hire lawyers, right? It's this profound belief that like, no, individual, like one could be amazing and the other one could be terrible, right? Like, so you really have to get to know who this person is. It's not just a matter of saying like, are you a lawyer? And they say, yes. And you're like, okay. Obviously it doesn't work like that. So sales is kind of the same thing. You know, if you say, oh yeah, I've done sales for 10 years, they don't go, okay, you're qualified. It's like they go, okay, well, we want to know if you're a good salesperson. So that's when they like almost give you like a exam in sales in like the job interview. You know, here, prove to me that you're good at sales. Let's put you in all these sales type scenarios and let's see if you can like give the right answer, you know? So sales interviews are more like, you know, let's act it out, right? Because we don't trust a qualification. We don't trust years of experience. We only trust ability that we see right in front of us, you know? That's how a lot of sales jobs go when you're not like recruiting somebody based on their reputation. Okay? So they'll probably give you more sales specific questions, including like cliched crap, like sell me this pen and, you know, like, I mean, do people even ask that? It's like, it's so stupid. It's like, you know, yes, that may, I guess, test your abilities for certain types of sales, but certainly not all sales, like across the board, you know, especially more specialized stuff. That's been my background. You're working in a very specialized area, business to business. There's inside sales, there's outside sales. They're really different, you know. So consequently, the way you evaluate candidates is completely different, you know. Anyway, I'm not sure if that really answered your question, Department of More Traditional Jobs. The basics do say stay the same in that they want proof in an interview of your sales abilities. They don't want you to talk about, you know, like your experience, like this is what you've done. They want to see it demonstrated for them. That's the general rule. So it differs from interviews in, say, operations, where The problem, and a lot of candidates complain about this, is that you're never allowed to demonstrate how good you are. You have to talk about how good you are. And if you're not good at talking about how good you are, even though you're brilliant, that can backfire. It can make you less effective in getting those jobs. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Alpi Palace says, I just got a suspected spam call and they silently hung up on me. I assume this is a telemarketer. It's amazing how they persist regardless of stigma, but nobody's going to hire you if you explicitly tell them you're a scammer. Yeah, that's kind of the first paragraph of being a scammer, I guess. Don't tell people you're a scammer. It's like, hello, I'm a scammer. I'd just like to come in and steal a few of your things. Is this a good time? I'd actually probably talk to them longer if they knocked on my door than if it was like someone just trying to sell me something, or it was like a Jehovah's Witness or something. Alpi Pal says, question, kind of like Among Us, imposter game, whatever that is. If you have a resume or a job interview that goes way too well, are they going to deem you suspicious and disqualify you? Listen, everything happens some of the time. So no matter how ridiculous, no matter how stupid, no matter how offensive, no matter how counterproductive, everything is going to happen sometimes, right? Okay? So this is not common, but there's a lot of weird people that are incompetent and that have strange ideas. And so I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me, like, I encountered this. I'm sorry, you're just way too good. We suspect something, something doesn't smell right, you're way too good. So no, it's like, okay, sure. Can you say paranoid? Hey Bill, sell me your $100 MBA course that I'm not going to buy anyway. Just kidding. Yeah. That only works if you can spell properly, by the way, Alpi Pal. So touche. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't do a hard sell on stuff. I'm not here trying to shove stuff in your face. The other thing is that it doesn't really help me when people take my course that really didn't need it or don't want it or can't benefit from it. So then they complain, and then, they hate me. They're upset. It's like that doesn't help me. Okay. Like if that's how it's going to turn out, let's not do this. You know what I mean? The only people that I would want to take my course are people that are going to benefit from it and be happy they did. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have like a customer service department to like answer a billion questions every day from people. It's like, you know what I mean? It's just me. So, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, like it's only, if it makes sense to you and if you're looking to do this, and that's why I've tried to make this process as transparent as possible. I've got videos describing each of my courses. So if you're interested, you can see like, okay, this is how it works. This is how it's structured. This is what you learn. This is, the deal. So it's as transparent as possible. And then when you pull the trigger on it, there's no surprises. It's just like, yep. If you watch the video, you get what, I explained. And I haven't got a lot of complaints. So that's the deal. LOL, sell me this pen. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Your videos have helped me tremendously during my last job change. The thing about sell me this pen is that they never put restrictions on it where you can't lie, right? So the answer to sell me this pen is really easy if you can lie. The thing is to find out about the customer, like it's to get information on the customer. What are their wants? What are their needs? And then you tie the product to that want or that need. I mean, it's a simple idea. But the problem is a lot of the examples I've seen of people doing this where they, even on YouTube, someone will have like a video with like the answer to sell me this pen. It's got like 25 million views on it. And it's like, they're like lying through their teeth when they sell the pen. Oh, you're into, you like Winston Churchill. He's like a personal hero of yours. Well, this highlighter is the actual highlighter that Winston Churchill used when he, I don't know, he didn't actually sign like the peace surrender document in World War II because he wasn't prime minister then. But when he received it, this is the highlighter we used to like highlight the signature of the person who did, right? So you get this pen, it's well worth the $400 I'm selling it for. You could probably get his DNA off that. You could clone him and he could live with you in your house for the rest of your life. Think about that. $400, that's all it takes. Whatever. It's like if there's no restrictions on like what you're allowed to say and you can lie through your teeth, anybody could do it, It's a bigger challenge to actually not be able to lie to people's face and sell a pen effectively. That's what I haven't seen a lot of examples of. So God knows what they accept in a job interview. In a real job interview, they're not going to accept like, just some outright lie to sell the pen, even if you get the idea behind it, right? That was a weird question. Let's see. Craig Cockburn says, or Coburn. Craig Coburn is how you say it. Why are there so many ridiculous biases in recruitment? For example, you haven't done project management for 4 years, thereby implying I've forgotten everything about it and biasing against women returning. Oh, Craig, you and me are like that. We go way back to the good old days. I worked as I was the head projects guy for a company. And yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, why are there biases? It's because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get to know you without getting to know you. It takes a lot of time to get to know someone. So that's obviously not what they're trying to do. They're trying to take shortcuts. And that's what a lot of these silly, cliche job interview questions are about. They're stupid, borderline, completely transparent ways of like supposedly checking for things. But the fact is that they're so common, like these questions are so common, they're so well known that like people go to YouTube channels like mine and many other resources on the internet to like learn a very canned response. And a lot of times it fools them. It the recruiter can't tell if that's a canned response. It's this continual game of cat and mouse they try and play. So they have to tack on another question to like test for, if that answer you gave is actually true. It's based on heuristics and it's also based on statistical probability, right? So for example, if you know that, you haven't done project management for 4 years and let's pretend that statistically you have data that shows that people who haven't worked in a project management role for 4 years, when they come back to project management, they have a really long learning curve because all kinds of flavor of the month project management initiatives have come in and they're unfamiliar with them. And maybe their old skills have sort of atrophied a little bit, right? So what you're going to do as a recruiter is you're going to say, okay, I know from statistical probability that you're in that situation. Therefore, you have a higher likelihood of needing a really long onboarding time, getting over the learning curve to get you back into the swing of things. And also you have to bone up on all the latest like project management flavor of the month corporate horseshit, for want of a better word, if you pardon my French. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, I'm just going to make the assumption about you. That's who you are. Therefore, I'm not going to hire you. I'm going to go with somebody who doesn't have a 4-year gap. Even though the reality is that you're probably a way better project manager than them because you have way more years of experience and you have broader experience or whatever. But they don't understand any of that. They're simply going off heuristics that says like, okay, work gaps are bad. Being out of the role for a while and then coming back is bad. Therefore, I'm going to paint you with that brush. I'm going to make that assumption about you. It's full of assumptions. Exactly. That's the flaw of this. That's why it's so ineffective. That's why people select employees like this at the low level. They don't select employees like this at the high level for good reason, because it's totally ineffective, right? At the high level, you're investing the time to get to know who people actually are. and you're also doing it partly through networking. So they have a track record and a reputation and all that. That's easily verifiable. So, you're spotting the flaws in this, and you're absolutely correct. And the question becomes, how far can they push this in terms of we're wanting to put less and less time into a candidate, but yet still pick a candidate that isn't horrible? It's also served by the fact that, like we talked about earlier, 80% of job seekers are looking at posted jobs, which are only 20% of the jobs that are out there. So it's totally oversaturated. So they have an oversupply of people, of candidates. So they can afford to be as poor as this in their choosing, because they always have another candidate that has the thing that they've got into their heads is the thing that signals you're a good candidate. Craig says, another bias, you live too far away. The commute is my business, not yours. Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, a lot of those, I don't know in your case, but a lot of those can be kiss-offs. They've already made the decision not to hire you based on something else, and they're using silly things like this as their purported reason for rejecting you. They are never going to give you the real legitimate reason for rejecting you. Okay? Especially in the United States. In the United States, companies have been sued over that. So they've even like a lot of companies have internal policies in the HR department in recruitment and selection where they are not allowed to tell people. It's not just a preference to make it convenient for them. It's actually policy not to tell people, right? So they know they can't give the real reason. So sometimes I'll just make up a reason that sounds innocent and, right? They don't want to comment on a trait of yours or something in your background. So they'll say, oh, well, I'm sorry. It's just, you live too far away. Something that's innocent, you can't change, but yet seemingly logical, right? So when I hear that, that's what I suspect, but I don't know in your case. Alpipal says, it's the exact same answer as you put it, and it's very smart. Okay. I'm sorry, Alpipal. I can't tell to what you're referring, but as long as we're on the same page, that's what counts. Craig says, and we can't recruit you as you are based in the UK. UK citizen applying for a job in Ireland, plane fare is 40 pounds return. Why not ask me my address where I will do the job from and not where I am now? Yeah, it sounds like a kiss-off. Sounds like a kiss-off, Craig. They'll never give you the real reason. The only way for you to find that stuff out, first of all, it doesn't matter what random people think. You're going to encounter a lot of people that wouldn't know talent when it's staring them straight in the face. And like I've said before, it often is. But if you're noticing a pattern again and again and again and again, you keep getting rejected to the point where it's being suspicious. Maybe there is something that I'm doing that's maybe less than ideal. What is that? That's where maybe a hiring coach, what do you call it? Like a personal coach, can help you. I'm not a personal coach, but for example, every second Monday, I do a collaborative live stream with another YouTuber who is, and she, she doesn't sell courses. She sells consulting time, right? A lot of ex-recruiters and current recruiters do this, right? Because they say well, I'm a recruiter. I know how they think, and I can help you to outmaneuver them. And what you can do with these people is you do a mock interview with them. You do a pretend job interview where they pretend to interview you as if it were real. And then they evaluate you and they say look, here's my professional advice. You're doing this, and this that are really good, but here's something, this was a bad answer. You should change that answer more like this. And you're doing this thing, where you, with your body language or with your tone of voice, and it's kind of off-putting because it suggests this. And I know that's not who you are. That's not what you're going for. So I would work on that. And this is how I would recommend you work on it. And, if you change that, I think that'll help you, So that's why you would hire like a interview coach, career coach type person. And they can maybe help you. That's how you get actual feedback, right? Because these people are never going to be honest with you why they rejected you. Craig says, sell me this pen from the Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, if you're gonna get the legitimate answer for the question, go right to the horse's mouth. That's the fountain of knowledge, isn't it? Alpipal, French, not pardoned. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Craig says, but the main skill of project management are getting on with people, trust and effective collaboration, the soft skills. These don't go out of date. No, they don't. You're absolutely right. Craig, most people get hired through the hidden job market. They don't go through posted jobs. All the stuff that you're describing, you're absolutely correct. These are the flaws of going through companies' official hiring processes with the HR department, where you start at the bottom and you go up through these peons. Recruiters are low-level employees, right? Like everybody knows that. A lot of times recruiter is an entry-level job, right? You can get higher-level recruiters, but they're a lot more rare than you would think. And there's a lot of people that pose as like executive recruiters when they're not actually executive recruiters. They would love to be executive recruiters, but they're not. And you can tell within 10 seconds of dealing with them if they're an actual executive recruiter or not, because their manners and their etiquette like shine right through. Like you can tell if you're dealing with a high-level person or not. It's actually a low-level job. So a lot of people, most people, in fact, get hired not by doing this process. They get hired by some form of networking. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can do this. You have access to that. I did a video 2 weeks ago. It's called like how I would get a job. If I had to get a job today, this is what I would do. It was like 45 minutes long. I went through 11 methods of getting a job. You could check that out. You could check out this course. I sell my Get Hired course is quite popular. And in it, I tell people how to apply for posted jobs and how to apply for hidden jobs. 80% of the jobs that are out there are hidden, right? I know you guys are probably sick and tired of me doing this, but I'm going to do it again, just for the benefit of some people that may not know this. Here we are at ChatGPT. Like, this is the most basic form of research you could possibly do. This is the starting point for how to confirm something. So I'm going to see if I can use the voice feature here. Okay, so here we go. In terms of getting a job, of all the jobs that are out there, how many, in terms of a percentage, are actually posted publicly? Right? I have to do this because most people that are having problems in job search, they're not like realizing this. Okay, so here you go. It changes this answer slightly. Sometimes it says 20 to 30%. Now it says 15 to 20. That's more accurate as far as I'm concerned. It's not 30%. It's more like 15. Okay. But here, 80 to 85% of jobs are filled through the hidden job market. Okay. Now, this is varying degrees of accuracy here. Internal promotions, employee referrals, networking, direct outreach, and recruiters filling with roles without posting them. Well, networking is the same thing as direct outreach. It's just people talking to each other, right? Employee referrals are essentially another form of networking, people talking to each other, right? Okay, so I mean, you can go from here. You don't have to take my word for it. Now, when you go through networking, the thing is that all the stuff that Craig was talking about, which are valid points, they're the flaws with, the formal hiring process done by the recruitment and selection people in the HR department. You bypass all of that, That process is biased against people with work gaps. It's biased against people that are generalists. It's biased against arguably introverts sometimes. There's a lot of different biases there, right? So if you fit into those categories and you're having a hard time winning at that game, tune into this, tune into the hidden job market. That's where that's also where all the good jobs are. They don't need to post them. You don't have to look far and wide for someone who would want this job. A lot of people want that job the moment you mention it because it's good. So look into that. If this is all new information, you don't know, don't take my word for it. Go out and do your own independent research, realize this is true, and then if you need help with that, come back and see me. That's one of the big advantages of that course. I show you exactly how to do some of these methods that tap that. Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, especially if you're an introvert, that course is for you. Bayer says, when I started university, I always thought it's about technical skill, but realized while doing my bachelor's in computer science that it's almost always soft skills. Well, it's both. You see, what happens is, think about job interviews, okay? They post a job, and it could be a technical type job. You need like an engineering degree, or you need, some kind of technical skills, right? Okay. Well, all the people that they call in for an interview, that they select to do an interview with, all those candidates, there could be like 6 of them, there could be 10 of them. On paper, they all are technically qualified, right? It wouldn't make sense to bring someone down to a job interview if on paper, they're not qualified to do the job. What would be the point? Even if you love them and they answer every question right, you still can't hire them because they don't have the technical chops to do the job. The thing is that there's more than one person out there that's qualified for a job, but recruiters have the problem where they have like 6 or 10 people they're talking to, candidates, but they can only offer the job to one. So they've got to like whittle down 6 or 10 down to one. So they need tiebreakers. They need like things that you use to distinguish between these candidates, right? And that's where the soft skills come in. Because one candidate has the technical chops. They can do the job. Unfortunately, they're insufferable. They don't know how to talk to anyone. They get offended very easily. And, they're really off-putting and offensive, right? Another candidate, they're just as technically qualified to do the job, except that they're very charismatic, they're very articulate, you enjoy dealing with them, it's a very pleasant experience, and they seem very forthcoming. They seem like they really want to help out as much as possible, and they have a great attitude. Who would you pick? If you had to work with this person, they were like going to be your assistant, which one would you pick? So yes, soft skills are important, but with the assumption that all the candidates all have the technical skills. So it's not a question of like one is more important than the other. You need both, right? That's how these things work. Excuse me. So it's not about like, oh, I thought it was about technical skills, but it's not. It's like, well, no, it is. It's just that, you need both, right? Like, it's almost like learning to drive. You first do the written test, but then you do the practical. There's like 2 phases, right? This is the same thing. You got the technical side down. Great. That's phase 1. Now you need the soft skills, because what they found was that the reason why people don't work out in jobs or they underperform is not because of a lack of technical skills. It's because they have issues interoperating with other people, right? People lose their temper. People don't see the other person's side of the problem. People don't know how to talk to someone. They get offended, when someone talks to them in a nasty way, right? Like that's what they find is the real reason why people leave jobs or underperform. It's not that I don't know how to do my job. It's that I don't want to work for that person because I hate their guts. That's the real world sort of more practical scenario you see, right? So that's why soft skills are just as important in the real world. You need both. And schools do a shit job, if you pardon my French again, of preparing people for this. They underestimate the importance of soft skills, and they do a lousy job generally of teaching them. That would be an obvious improvement right there. But then, of course, you would need people that understand and respect this stuff, which a lot of times you don't have. Craig says, I must run a course on biases and assumptions in recruitment and how to dissect and overcome them. That would be a good thing if you could get people to take it. Yeah. Syed says, thank you for your interest. We received an exceptionally large number of applicants, many of which were outstanding. After careful consideration, your applicant was not selected. After 1 minute only. Yeah, because it's a kiss-off, right? Excuse me. Alpipel says, low-level employee. Yeah, a worker, right? As opposed to a divisional vice president. I pasted a YouTube link to a short of a guy who nailed the answer to sell me this pen question. It was the same as yours. Okay. Okay. Which answer I gave? The cliched one or the Winston Churchill one? I think the Winston Churchill one should be in a video. I should do that. And then just fool the world into thinking that that's the way you should actually answer that question. You know? And Winston Churchill will come and live with you in your house forever. The end. So buy the pen. Confide of Scene says, how do you ask my boss to be my reference for my next job? You say, Mr. Boss Man or Madam Boss Lady? I'm a good employee, right? So naturally you want me to leave. Well, you can help me to leave and give me even more reason to leave by being a reference for me and giving me a great reference. So I just assume that you will do this. So I'm just letting you know that's what's going to happen, right? Yeah, it's tough. Okay, you pretty much can't use your current boss as a reference, generally speaking. That's kind of the general rule. Because generally speaking, your boss will not want you to leave. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but generally, they will not want you to leave. They hired you. You're currently employed, thus signaling that they consider you a valuable employee. So they're not going to assist you to leave, generally. Sometimes you get like more of a humanist kind of thing. People are just terribly nice to each other sometimes. And they'll want to help you as a friend, you know. But the general rule is that they will not want to assist you to get you to leave, right? They will want to keep you here. So their tendency will be to not only not help you, but there's been a lot of cases of bosses sabotaging employees' attempt to leave, right? So very tough ask, right? As a general rule, I would say don't bother because it's probably not going to happen. It's very risky. If you feel you have a very special, friendly relationship with your boss where you consider them friends outside of work and stuff like this, maybe you could hit them up for that, right? But that's usually how it works. So I wouldn't pursue it. I would just resign yourself to the fact that it's probably not going to happen. But that's just me. I don't know your specific situation, so I can't say for sure. Alpipal says, yes, networking. I was talking about earlier when you did something astonishing publicly, or you have a great LinkedIn resume and people reach out to you, you have momentum and stability. You lost me there on this one, Alpipal. Are you talking about me, or are you talking about, like, in general, a person who has that? Okay, if you could maybe elaborate, then I could maybe speak to that. Confide a Scene. I'm asking because my employment was a fixed-term co-op. Oh, I see. Okay, so like it's term employment, and they had a great experience with you, or you believe they did, and you're saying like, thank you very much. I'm leaving anyway because my contract term is over. Could you give me a good reference? Yes. Okay. Well, in that case, that's completely different. Then you would approach them and you'd say, listen, do it when I've said this 1,000 times before. Do it when they're not stressed out and they're not preoccupied, and it's not like inconvenience, so you're not pestering them. A good time, if you don't know, a good time is usually like immediately after lunch on a Friday. Okay, assuming they have like Saturday, Sunday off, and they work like regular standard day shift like most people, immediately after lunch on a Friday. It's Friday, they're feeling good, the weekend's coming, they've just had their break, they're just relaxed, they've had some food, they feel pretty good, right? They're coming back, and then you say like, hey, listen, you got a couple minutes, and then let them say yes. And then ideally you would talk to them one-on-one. So like if they have an office, you could go in their office and, you close the door. Or, you at least you go off somewhere where you're not in public, you're not overheard by everybody, right? And you say, listen, as you know, my employment term is coming to an end soon. And that means that I unfortunately be moving on. I have really enjoyed my time here, but it's coming to an end. So I will be looking for a new position, and I'm wondering if I could count on you to give me a good reference. Is that something you feel you can do? And then let them say yes or no, right? Like don't just keep talking, let them answer. And if they say yes, you say, okay, great. I would really appreciate that. That would really help me out quite a bit. Now, here's the phone number I have for you, and here's the email address I have for you. Is that the best way for someone to reach you if they're wanting a reference for me? And just have them confirm that, right? Okay, so that's like, something like that, something along those lines is how the conversation would probably go. And that's it. It's like, okay, thanks very much. You have yourself a great day. Now, before you leave, okay, if you're going to your boss and you have a good relationship with your boss, like, you get along well and they seem to be happy with your work, you can go a step further. And that's when I would ask this next part. After you've asked for a reference, okay, you got the reference all done. They've agreed to do it. They said, yes, I can give you a good reference. I'm willing to do that. And yes, here's the contact information that would be the best for me. Then you could say, well, that's great. Listen, something else, actually, another thing that would really, really help me out, if you could bring yourself to do this for me, would be a short letter of recommendation. Would it be possible for you to write me a letter of recommendation? And let them say yes or no. They'll probably say, well, I never thought about it, maybe. You say, okay, great. Well, listen, if you do, I just want you to know I'd really appreciate that. It would be really help me to secure another position, especially in today's job market. That would be very important to me. So I'd consider it a personal favor if you could do that. And then the last thing you would do is you try and get a rough timeline and say like, well, listen, my last day is this day, right? So if I could receive that by this day, that would be perfect. That's all. And then you just thank them, and then that's that. So that's something optional you can do that is, that can help. So not only are you giving a reference, which you kind of have to do anyway for a lot of jobs, is that when you're in a job interview or whatever, you bring that to a job interview, and then if you're mentioning this contract work term that you did with these people, you say, oh, and here's a letter of recommendation from my boss, right? So that can help, The other thing, of course, you can do while you're there is like networking opportunities. So before you leave, go and talk to your boss's boss, go talk to like people around there that, are one level up from you or more, and, get their names, get maybe their contact information or whatever, so you can connect with them on LinkedIn, send them LinkedIn invitations and that kind of stuff before you leave, right? So that you're maximizing the things you're getting from that job. Okay, where did I leave off here? I think I was here. Alpipal, I learned how to buy a car from a dealership entirely from YouTube. Never had to consult anyone. I did once, and it helped a little bit, but I was able to take the charge. Great example of the good side. Yeah, well, there's a lot. That's the great thing about the information age. I mean, obviously, the thing that people are buzzing about right now is things like ChatGPT. So some things, you can apply to that. So if I wanted to buy a car from a dealership and I wanted to really play hardball, what would my strategy be and what would I have to say? Just for the people out there, all two of you that haven't used ChatGPT and don't use it, you know what I mean? It's like, here you go. Now, the real value is like, where you get it to like actually write out templates and stuff for you. If I had to send an email to ask for a reference, what would I say? That kind of stuff, right? If I had to send an email to ask for a reference from my boss before I leave at the end of my contract term job, what would I say to them? Can you give me a template of like how I would send this in an email or in a message or even in a conversation? Right? Okay, and then there you go. So here you go. Here's like, a great way of, you change, you add in like the name and you change a few things and away you go. So it's like a great starting point. So for a lot of things that you've never done before, you can do this kind of thing and get some answers. So it's kind of a no-brainer, like get on ChatGPT and other AI tools that we have. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. Does it get things wrong? Yes. But it's a great starting point for a lot of things. Alpipal, I meant the proving yourself thing. You are more independent, and in the case you aspire to be a CEO, you have the means to prepare and be confident and all that good stuff. Okay? Like you are a real person now, not a low-level employee. Sigh. Lots of people make a quick buck selling rubbish, but real wealth comes from selling something of value that actually need it. Okay, give me my pen back. That'll cost you $5. That was the guy's answer. Okay. Confidacine says, is there anything else I should do before I leave? Well, those are the big three. You got a reference, you got a letter of recommendation, you got networking connections. Now remember, you're talking to your boss to get a reference, right? That doesn't mean that you can't talk to the other people there to also get references. Maybe it's even appropriate to hit up other people for letters of recommendation. You could hit up a coworker and say, listen, I worked with this person for 6 months in this role, and I can attest to the fact that they're an awesome employee. I wholeheartedly recommend them. I would love to work with them again myself. And specifically, this is what they were good at. They were very accommodating. They were always pleased to talk with me. They always, sort of went beyond to help me out or to help out all new employees. That's the kind of person that I'd be interested in working with in any company I work for in the future. I can attest that this person is a shining example of like a brilliant employee, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. That would be really nice, right? So you could go to coworkers, you could go to your boss, you can go to heads of other departments that aren't your boss. I don't know, maybe you had some interaction with them. Maybe you had a conversation with one of them one time or something. They could be a reference and say, yes, this person did work here. Yeah, they were a good employee. They didn't work in my department, but they worked in there, and I interacted with them, and they were, they followed all the rules, and they were, pleasant to be around. So yeah, I'd recommend them. Something like that, right? You don't just go to your boss. You could go to them for all these things, right? So before you leave, I try and do as much of that stuff as possible if you really want to maximize what you're taking away from it. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, we've got down to the end of the chat. There's 28 people here. Get my course. If you are learning to get a job, you're trying to map out where the jobs are, how to discover them, how to put yourself up for them, especially if you're an introvert, especially if you don't understand the whole networking thing. You can do a lot of that stuff online. You just need to know how to do it, right? So if that's specifically what you're looking for, check out that course. There's a link in the description. And I've done videos on describing the course. So it's as transparent as possible, what you get, how it works, all that kind of stuff. Is it harder to get a union job? I don't know. It depends what industry you're talking about. I don't think so. It just depends. Like, for example, if you want to be a teacher, well, if you're going to be working as a teacher, usually to have a job as a teacher, you are automatically part of a union. That's as I understand. I've only dealt with unions kind of in one industry. I've worked across 5 industries. I only dealt with unions really in depth in one, and it was just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You had a totally stupid, unreasonable union doing this with totally stupid, unreasonable management. It was just retarded. And guess where I was? I was right where the rubber meets the road. And I did not like it at all. It was just needlessly idiotic, needlessly obstructive. You got management that, were frustrated by unreasonable demands by workers, and they intentionally would grind them into the dust. And then you got workers intentionally like trying to get everything they could possibly get, no matter how ridiculous, and just sticking it to their own employer, right? Like sabotaging their own employer, just out of ideology or something. Silly from both sides. It convinced me to get that F out of that industry, and I'm glad that I did, and I've never looked back. Unfortunately, though, when I was teaching, I did get a glimpse into some of the actual uses of a union, because with teaching, at least what I saw, this is just what I saw, and I'm sure nobody cares, but I'll say it anyway. Like, you're under a lot of pressure, apparently, to pass the students, at least in the program that I was in. It was silly. It was like they regard students as customers, which is messed up to begin with. And then like you're under a lot of pressure to pass everybody. And it's like, I'm not from academia. I was going back because I was asked to do some, it's like, oh, you failed some students. That's a problem. We need to talk about that. It's like, what? Yeah, I failed them because they didn't get the answers right. And I did teach them. I did go to great lengths to teach them, as evidenced by the fact that a lot of other students did brilliantly. But oh no, you can't do that. They might feel bad about this. So, it was like, okay, how do you push back against that? Well, traditionally it was all the teachers would be part of a union, and they'd stick it to the administration and say like, well, we have quality standards to maintain. I understand that it might harm the image of the school if a certain number of them fail, but sorry, that's just how it is. If, they don't learn the material or avail themselves of the opportunity. So I got a taste of that. I didn't like it. So I kind of like, okay, this is not, I was doing it on the side for fun. It was fun in the beginning. And I feel like I made a lot of impact for a lot of the young students and stuff, and it was very kind of gratifying thing, especially considering some of the praise I got for it. But then I had to deal with that. So I kind of left. My heart goes out to a lot of teachers that are stuck in that situation. You can't leave, it's really weird. But that was where I saw, okay, this is where unions are very, very useful in today's day and age. The Recce report says finding the hidden job market is a skill everyone needs. Absolutely. I mean, it's really not hard to find. It's a LinkedIn message away or an email away. It's really not very far away. Alpi Pal says, I'm sorry you had a bad experience with the labor union. Yeah. Yeah, you guys have like, it was the CAW. You guys have like the AAW, American Auto Workers, right? We have the CAW, Canadian Auto Workers. Same kind of thing, right? That was the situation. So, yeah. Anyway, we got 36 people here. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm going to be winding this down soon, unless there's a lot of questions coming. Yeah, check out my course. I mentioned this one. The other one that people might be interested in here is this one. That's if you're wanting to improve your communication skills so that you can climb the ladder. Because if you have technical skills and you're like a worker or something, if you want to climb the ladder, be a supervisor, manager, executive, you need to tack on various things, right? One of the things you need to tack on is above average communication skills. So everything I learned going from a supervisor to CEO in terms of communication skills, I put it into that course. That's what that course is. So you'd have to tack on, if you want to be a manager, for example, like a general manager, you have to tack on, financial literacy, you have to tack on people management skills. Like there's a bunch of other things, but for communication skills, that's kind of what that's for. So it's called Write Like a Professional. It's about writing, but it's also about what you say and how you respond in different situations. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check out that course. Once again, link in the description. That can really give you some of the skills where people will regard you as a contender to promote into sort of one level up, right? So that's the idea. Check that out. Alpipal, I don't like French, but how is it that it's unprofessional when your boss does it regularly? Listen, I'm joking when I say pardon my French. I think it's funny because I'm in Canada. The English-speaking people say pardon my French. The French-speaking people say pardon mon anglais, which is like pardon my English, right? So that dates back to the whole English-French thing, that we had mainly 350 years ago or whatever it was. Anyway, it's kind of a bit of an in-joke. So I know I wouldn't say pardon my French if this was in a professional setting. It really isn't. This is YouTube. I'm making a more concerted effort these days to try and keep it a little real on YouTube. Not to the extent that's going to get my channel deleted, but you know what I mean? Just kind of not be so completely formal all the time. So what is it that's unprofessional when your boss does it regularly? Listen, it may be the culture of a lot of industries where they drop 3 F-bombs in every sentence. I mean, I was in the railroad. I started off in the railroad. That's how you would talk to your boss. And then you'd slam your fist down on their desk and start yelling. That's how you kind of made yourself clear. That was just how people did things. I mean, if you're in construction, you work in the steel industry or any number of things, that's kind of the culture. People are very foul-mouthed, especially at a low level, right? And the idea is that although people are used to it, especially at a blue-collar level, the reality is that it's unprofessional. It really is. And that's why when you go a bit higher, you see that disappearing, even in those same industries. You're not going to get the CEO dropping a bunch of F-bombs to the workers in a speech. You don't see that. There's a reason why. It's because it's unprofessional. People don't trust you. People don't think very highly of you when you do that. Now, when you're young, you probably can't see this, and you probably think I'm talking a lot of BS. That's okay. When you get older, you'll realize the same thing, that this is how it works. Okay, so it's generally a good idea to try and clean up your language if you have any kind of ambition to move beyond the sort of worker level. You know what I mean? If you're in an industry where that's just the norm, who am I to say it's inappropriate? But the fact that you have to tone down your language anytime you're sort of exposed to something outside of that little world, that probably tips you off the fact that it is unprofessional, right? We're sort of getting more crass as a society. We're tolerating foul language and stuff more and more. That's the general trend, but in high level circles, it still is not tolerated, and there's a reason for that. So if your boss does it regularly, I don't think there's a lot you could do. You could tell them to tone it down, but yes, you have that option, but I don't know if that's going to be really super effective, or it's just going to be more of a thing that it doesn't paint a target on your back, but it signals that you're not really on the same level with or on the same wavelength with your boss. That might have a bunch of negative consequences. So it's up to you to decide whether it makes sense to do that. Usually we can't control people that are at our level or up. You know what I mean? That's the general rule. We have control over ourselves. We can decide if we leave. We can decide what we do with ourselves, but we can't control another person. Um, Gerardo says, any advice on how to begin networking on the hidden job market when you have little to no network to begin with? Yeah, like, okay, look up something called direct outreach. I talk about that quite extensively. I did a video 2 weeks ago, like I mentioned maybe 20 minutes ago. I did a video 2 weeks ago on my channel, this channel. It's called like how I'd get a job, right? And I cover 11 different methods of finding a job. And a couple of those methods, like direct outreach and informational interviews, you don't need to know anybody to do this. You could arrive in a city, you know absolutely no one in that city, and you can get a job, with networking relatively quickly, right? So check out that. One method is called direct outreach. Another method is called informational interviews with a delayed ask. Okay, so I talk about those extensively in my course. I show you exactly how to do those with templates and everything. I've talked about them on my channel, here and there, including in that video I just mentioned. So check that out. Go to ChatGPT, ask it about direct outreach, Okay, it's not based on having a network. Here. So in terms of getting a job, what about the method of getting a job called direct outreach? What is it? How does it work? And is it effective? You can do this kind of thing too, right? Like it's really, this is the very first step in, learning about what's going on out there and stuff. Okay. So here you go. How it works, talk to the right people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm curious to see what this thing says. Is it effective? Yes, incredibly. Studies show that 50 to 70% of jobs are filled through networking and referrals, and direct outreach is one of the most powerful forms of networking. So there you go. If that doesn't sell you, I don't think there's anything I could say that would make a clear case for it. Okay, so look into it. That's what I teach in my course. That's like all the contract work and all the stuff I've done in the last 15 years is all direct outreach or informational interviews, those two things, So I teach those two methods primarily with regard to getting a job. So look into it. There's a bit to it. It's not like, you see, I do videos about like how to answer job interview questions. Those are easy because you can put it into a nice 5-minute video. Here's a question. Here's how you answer. Here's why. There you go. But the networking stuff, it's a little more involved because it's not that it's more complex. It's just that you have a lot of principles that all apply at the same time. So in a video, you could maybe talk about one or two principles. Here's what you say, here's who you say it to. Okay? But like, what we didn't mention is that, if you're doing it on LinkedIn and your LinkedIn photo shows you drunk and partying with 10 other people, that's going to like negate all of this, right? It's not that you're doing the wrong method. It's just that, you've got to also present yourself professionally, and here's how. So you see, that applies simultaneously. So there's like a whole bunch of these that apply simultaneously, right? So if you want to say like from beginning to end, here's how you do it successfully, it's not going to be a 5-minute video. It's not even going to be an hour video. It's going to be quite involved because just when you think you've made it idiot proof, someone comes along and says, well, I tried your method. It doesn't work. And then they volunteer, by the way, when I showed up to the interview, I wasn't wearing any pants. And it's like, you're right. I did not actually say that you have to wear pants during the interview. So gotcha, you got me. It's like there's a lot of things that you have to cover to make sure the whole thing actually works. That's what networking's like, And if you don't have a lot of soft skills, but you got to develop them, then you got to put those things in place so then you can do it. Let's see here. Where did I leave off? I don't like French. Okay, unprofessional. Any advice on how to begin networking? I'll PayPal, but I'm not a low-level employee and I don't need to prove myself to anybody. No, you don't. No one has to prove themselves to anybody. Clement, someone said he doesn't like French. Should I sing La Marseillaise? Well, I don't know who said that, but I didn't say I didn't like French. I'm bilingual. I speak French. Alpipal says, I mean, emotions aside, it takes more effort to work around that and become independent. Anyway, any comments on not liking your career and want to restart, like a college major or an industry you've worked for 5 years? You'll make less money since you're restarting for sure. Well, no, it depends. I mean, I told you I've worked across 5 industries, so I've moved sideways in a lot of them. So, like for example, I came out of the railroad, I went into aerospace. I was running an airline for what that's worth. I didn't go down, I went up. So, I mean, it really depends how you do it. And I'm not going to say, oh yeah, it was all pure skill and I knew exactly what I was doing. So, no, it was partly luck. There was an opportunity, they were looking for this. I went for it and they picked me, so it's like, but you shoot for it, right? So, you don't necessarily have to start at the bottom necessarily if you're switching industries. A lot of industries, they place value on similar skills, right? Like all the management stuff, like managing people, great communication skills, great collaboration skills, the ability to do public speaking, the ability to present, the ability to persuade, the ability to coordinate and manage projects, having financial literacy, all this stuff. I mean, that translates across every industry, right? They value that stuff in every industry. So if you supervise people like in a store, like in a clothing store, you're working at the Gap or something, and you're the manager or you're the supervisor, you're supervising other employees, that experience totally carries over to a lot of similar things where you're managing employees, certainly at that level, maybe even one level up, So, what I'm saying? Like, you got to be a little strategic about it, but you don't always have to start at the bottom, right? And I know what you mean about being sick of your industry, but the reality is that a lot of jobs you get sick of because it's a job. Even if it's like some wonderful thing like baking cakes or whatever, you get to eat all the cake you ever wanted. You don't get to do it on your own terms. Sometimes you don't feel like getting up at 6 a.m. because you got to go bake cakes. You love baking cakes. You just don't want to do it at 6 a.m. You know what I'm saying? No matter what job you have, it's going to grate on you to a degree, right? It's understanding yourself and knowing like, okay, is this because it's just not on my own terms? Or is this because I'm just not suited to it? Or is it because these people are being totally unreasonable and this is not like a normal situation that people should be asked to tolerate? Having that awareness really, really helps. And I don't think anyone has it, certainly not when they start out. You need life experience to teach you that. Clement says, I have a question. How do you study the salary in a sector for a position? What do you mean study the salary? From an HR point of view, as opposed to what other point of view? An accounting point of view? Like, look, if you're asking, like, how do you get a ballpark amount, let's try it. Let me know your sector, Clement, and what your region is. Okay? Let me put that in the chat, and then we'll get into it. Okay? Confidocene says, is there anything special in your Get Hired course that I cannot find anywhere else? Well, I would like to think so. And would it be a good fit for an engineering student like me? Well, considering I took engineering, I have a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering, then probably. Yes. But listen, I'm not going to convince you. You figure out what you're looking for. You look up the course and determine if that's what you're looking for. Okay? I'm not going to try and give you a hard sell on it. Okay? If you're looking for this, great. If you're not, that's fine too. I don't want to talk you into something that you're really not into doing. Alpipal says, speaking of railroads, does getting a blue-collar career make it dangerous for your health or mental exhaustion? Yes, it can. Definitely. One of the reasons I quit the railroad was because, first of all, it's shift work. I spent a couple of years on the midnight shift with Tuesday, Wednesday off as my weekend. So you start work at midnight, you go till 8 in the morning. Now, because I was a supervisor, you start like 10:30, 11 p.m. and then go to 8 in the morning. Then you come home, you sleep, and then you go back to work every night. And then your weekend is Tuesday, Wednesday. So that means you work Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and then you get Monday night off and Tuesday night off, and then you're back on Wednesday. So that sucked, especially if you're young. That sucks. That killed my social life. And also, what I noticed was a lot of the workers at the place I was working, a lot of them, a suspiciously large number of them would die of cancer within 5 years of retiring, and it's from breathing in all kinds of stuff. Right now, they're all old compared to me. Now I'm old, but they were old when I was young. When I was like 25, they were like 60 or 65, whatever. And they had spent decades in that environment, maybe with less safety and health kind of codes and things. And it was suspicious. And I was in the same environment, so I wasn't super crazy about that. None of this is real. It's just my fears of stuff and anecdotal evidence, but that's kind of my thinking at the time. I haven't thought of that in like 30 years, but thanks for bringing it up. Let's see. So it can be, but is that a general rule? Like if you work in a skill trade, it will be hazardous to your health? No, not necessarily. It depends what you do. And the other thing is that a lot of people have a natural progression. One would want, at least if you think anything like me, one would want that like after you put in 20 years maybe of doing that, you'd maybe want to be a supervisor, maybe a manager. Then you're kind of getting a desk job. It's more of an advisory kind of thing. You've put in your time, so you know how the work is to be done. And when you're supervising people or listening to people's reports, you have an idea of what they're doing because you've done it yourself. But do you have to keep doing it at age 60 or age 50? No. You're more of like the supervisor. You know it, and you know better than the young people because they're just starting out. But you yourself don't have to do all the backbreaking work that maybe the 20-year-olds can handle easily, but you have more of a problem with, So you don't have to necessarily do that same job until the day you retire. You can maybe move up into a more cushy or more advisory kind of thing somewhere along the line, right? Clement, it can be a deal breaker sometimes, and it is hard to know if we are overvaluing ourselves or if it's the company which is under the market. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because like I used to teach a course in university called Total Compensation, and it was like how they compensate workers essentially, and I guess supervisors and this kind of stuff. And you get companies that pay like at the market, so they pay the market price. You get companies that pay below market, which means like say the average price for say a customer service rep in this city is say, I don't know, $50 an hour. I don't know. And they intentionally pay 40, right? It's not that they don't know what the average is. They intentionally pay 40. They resign themselves to having a higher employee turnover in that role. And they resign themselves to maybe not getting the geniuses, the best of the best of like customer service. But they accept that because they're still saving money by saving on their labor cost, right? And then you get other companies that pay above the market. So if the average market price for a customer service rep is $50 an hour, they pay $75 intentionally. But they expect that they get the best of the best, and they really push them hard, and these people won't leave because they're making good money for what they do, right? So you really push them. There was a company I worked for, and basically across the board, from like lowest level job to the highest level job, like just short of like the C-suite, certainly, they paid like almost like a flat 15% premium above market And the reason they paid that is because the company was so effing horrible that nobody stayed. It was a terrible company, terrible culture. And when I arrived, you look at like the employees that were working there. They had either been there less than 6 months or over 10 years, but there was nowhere in between, no one in between. And that's a real red flag, you know? So even with that 15% premium, they could not get people to stay because it was such a horrible environment. And I stayed for a year and a half. And you know what I'm saying? So sometimes it's not as simple as it appears. You know what I mean? You also get companies that pay below market for the low-level jobs and above market for the higher-level jobs, or vice versa, you know, depending on what their salary strategy is or the compensation strategy. So it takes all kinds, right? I wouldn't analyze this stuff to death. I would simply like look for an opportunity and then evaluate that opportunity purely on what it is. Don't look at like what the market is doing, or, you know, what's the range. Just look at this opportunity. What are they offering you? Does that make sense? If it's not something that makes sense, you know, then you don't take it. Or you pursue it and say, I need this. And then you just stick to that. And they say, well, what we pay this. It's like, okay, great. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll get back to you. You know, they're always going to push for like a low amount of money. You know, that's what they try and do. Sometimes they get away with that. Sometimes they don't. Right. Okay. Where do we leave off here? Albipal says, haha, piece of cake. Yeah. Clément says, I'm in France, a data analysis. Okay, no problem. So you'll pardon my French, right? And you'll pardon mon anglais. Lie the lower end, middle, and upper end based on experience. Lie the lower end, so that's to know the... Okay, right. So you're in France, a data analyst. So I'm just curious, okay? So your original question, Clément, was, how do you study salary? Okay, now you're saying France. It'd be nice if I knew the city, but anyway. I just wanted to do this. Okay, so I'm in France, and I'm a data analyst, and I'm wondering what the salary range is for someone working as a data analyst. What's the lower limit, the upper limit, and the average and the median, if you can tell me any of those? I'm just curious. I've never done this before on ChatGPT, so I'm just seeing. So here you go. Now this is euros, right? So, you know, you can do this kind of stuff. So supposedly, allegedly, what it's done here is it's gone to the website Payscale, right? Payscale.com or Payscale.fr or whatever there might be. And it's gotten this. Here's the link to it, okay? Salary expert. Here's the link to it. Edoxy, whatever that is. Here's the link to it. Okay, so it's got a few more things. It's tabulated them. Key takeaways. What's realistic for you? If you're junior mid, you can expect that. If you're in Paris or multi-year experience, you can expect that. So, you know, like just in 2 minutes, that's what you could find out. Now, you could dive into all of this and test its validity and try and get more evidence. You could even use ChatGPT for that, I suppose. You could say like, okay, give me some examples of job postings right now that are in Paris for data analysts. What are they paying? Put those into a table, you know, something like that, right? You know, you could dive deep into the stuff, and then you could go outside of ChatGPT and corroborate some of this, looking it up, right? There's many ways you could do it. You know, but that's kind of the thing. The only real thing that matters is like what they're offering you, right? Like this is all nice and everything, but like what really matters, the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is what opportunities can you get where they will offer you X. What is that number, you know? And if you suspect, well, maybe I could like bump them up a bit, you know, try it, you know? do this stuff, get a couple of offers and play one against the other. And, there you go. That's how you really find out. It doesn't really matter what, they're paying other data analysts. What matters is what they're going to pay you with your collection of skills and their perception of your value, right? That's the only thing that really matters. These are all like wild approximations, whichever way you slice it. Okay, Alpipel says, wow, you've worked 5 industries and have multiple college degrees. Congratulations. Well, 2. I have a bachelor degree in engineering, and then I have an MBA. They're on the wall, actually. There's one there, and there's one there. So, there, for what that's worth. I mean, you could either be in school your whole life, or you can do shit. You know what I'm saying? So, you try and, at least for me, I wanted to try and not just stay in school my whole life. I mean, who wants that? I mean, some people, that works for them, but certainly not for me. Alpipel, does the value of your country's money affect the basis of all job pays, like 20 Canadian or US for the exact same job? This gets into inflation and tax saving hacks and so much more. Yes, it does, but you generally don't see it in the short term. You see it through cost of living increases and stuff like that. Like, that's my knowledge. I'm not an economist, but that's usually how they correct for that stuff. That's like, you get paid whatever the salary is, because they can't just, you see, things like the inflation rate are always changing, and they're constant to a degree, and then they sort of, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but you always get inflation, right? And so to compensate for that every year, what a lot of employers do, not all of them, but what a lot of them do is they will give you an annual cost of living increase. So they'll give you like a 2% raise or whatever, just to compensate for inflation. So you technically get more money, but it has the same buying power as it did before. Then if your country is locked in like really symbiotic trade relationships with like another country, that can affect a lot of things too. But that's something where you see like, I think it expresses itself through other things that you would see. You would see employers going bankrupt and laying everyone off, or downsizing. Like that's how that would manifest itself. It wouldn't be like they just dock you pay or something. They just go out of business, or they have to lay people off. So that's how you see that expressed. That's how you eventually feel it. And it doesn't happen overnight either. There's a lag with these things, right? Bogdan says, I will follow. Excellent as always. Okay, good. Clement says Paris. Okay, well, it kind of mentioned Paris there. So, I mean, I'm not that you go off that, but I'm just saying that's an example of a starting point. And then you could look at the sources. Like, traditionally there was PayScale, there was Glassdoor, and then there was, is it salary.com? There was like 3 main ones that kind of gave that information publicly. But then again, they were not super accurate. That's the thing. And the other thing is that a lot of jobs don't have a market price, right? Like if I said, okay, like I live in a city that's got under 1 million people, okay? So Winnipeg, Canada. So if I said, okay, what's the market price for someone who can, I don't know, like something that's not very common, someone who can repair legacy elevator equipment, an elevator technician who knows how to repair elevators from the 1930s or 1940s, of which there are still several out there. What's the market price for that job in Winnipeg? And it's like, there's no data on that because there might be 3 of those people in the entire city. You know what I mean? So a lot of jobs you can get, they're just like, if it's a standard, very common job, then fair enough. You can find salary data on it publicly, and you have enough data to say, here's the upper, lower limit, here's the median, here's the average. But for a lot of jobs, you can't get that. There's not enough people in that role, and then the amount of knowledge that's out in the public domain is even less. So, what I'm saying? Like, you can't always go off these things. You have to sort of work it out for yourself. You have to consider individual job offers. LPPAL, like, how is it like living in that location, basically? I mean, with the inflation thing? Yeah, that's how usually it to my knowledge. Once again, I'm not an economist, so it's like economists will be able to give you a much better answer, or several much better answers on how that works. Bogdan says, what to do if you begin your internship and you do not have clear instructions? Should you take the lead and get something done in terms of studies and project planning either way? Or any sort of other tips for an internship? Okay, here's the deal, Bogdan. If you leave school, and we talked earlier about how school teaches you to be a conformist, right? Everything's based on rules. And so that makes sense. You have to maintain order, so everyone has to move together and follow the rules. The problem is that a side effect of going through the educational system is that we're now conditioned to always follow rules for everything, right? We're conditioned that there's always going to be somebody telling us exactly what to do and how to do it, and here's all the rules that we have to follow. We just have to follow the rules, follow the procedure, and we're golden, right? That's what we're conditioned to, how we're conditioned to operate, unfortunately, to varying degrees. And the problem is, you can come out of school, you go into a job in like a large organization. It'll probably work the same way. It'll be like being back in school. There's like lots of rules. Here's what you do. Here's the process. It's all written out for you. Here's all the rules. Follow this, you'll be fine, right? The problem is, if you go into medium-sized companies, smaller companies, it's usually a different culture. They don't have rules for absolutely everything. It's like think of me as a YouTuber, like as an extreme example. I'm just one person on YouTube. What rules am I following? I'm making my own rules. And they're not even rules. They're just like, one day I decide to do this, and maybe 2 years later I decide that's no longer a thing I should do. So I just change it. Do I write these rules down anywhere? No, I don't. They're all in my head. I do what I feel like it. And smaller companies are kind of more like that than they are like school, right? So the problem is, if you have an internship and you're into a medium-sized company or a small company, and also the industry matters too. Some industries move very, very fast, and you don't have time to like write very rigid rules for everything. Other industries are very, very mature. They hardly move at all. I mentioned the railroad earlier. That's a very slow-moving industry. It's been around for 100 years. It's probably going to be around for another 100 years. Not much changes. So, you can make it very formal. I'll write down all the rules, right? Exactly how much beer you're allowed to drink on the job before someone fines you a nickel for being drunk and then sends you home. That kind of stuff. Those were some of the rules 100 years ago that we still have today, probably. You know what I'm saying? So if you leave school and you go into a medium-sized company or a small company, you might be shocked. They don't have rules for everything. And they also just expect you to just get on with it. That's their culture. They have a lot of people that are used to taking the initiative. There isn't a set process of how to do it. Just figure it out and away you go. They might give you like a company rule book that says, okay, here's like the actual rules. Don't swear to customers. You're not allowed to smoke drugs on the job. Like things like this. But outside of that, how to do your actual job, you figure it out. Go talk to that person. They've done this role before. Go talk to that person. They helped out do this job before. Beyond that, you figure it out and go. Sometimes that's where your internship is. If it is, it's a learning experience for you. Get used to this different mentality. Okay? And sometimes the boss will be annoyed if you pester them constantly and say, well, how do you do this? You said you want me to sweep the floor. Well, where's the mop? And do I have to put the mop back at a certain time? And do I have to lock the door? And if so, where do I get the key? And do you want me to not mop during peak hours in case it's disruptive? What's the rule for that? Or how does that work? It's like, they're just like, I don't know, just go and get it done. I got my actual job to do. I don't have time to babysit every little tiny aspect of your job, you know? So, you know, it may be a situation like that. If it is, this is a tremendous learning opportunity for you. It's going to teach you some really empowering things. And hopefully, if it does, you can retain that and incorporate that into every future job that you have. And that'll separate you from the people who just stop and ask for permission for everything, maybe when they don't need to. You'll be able to just go and get it done with flying colors, and you come across like a genius, like a outperforming, shining employee. So just be open-minded to stuff like that, okay? Clement says, I'm wondering how HR or headhunter search intel. Do you search in recruitment agency website or somewhere else? Have any advice to find hard intel on what? On what? On like what money they should pay? Like you're talking about compensation? It continues. Do you have any tips for finding reliable information to study salaries in a particular sector? Like human resource departments, do I imagine, like studies, Hayes and firms, I would like to have the same information so that we can speak the same language when it comes to salaries. Clement says, I'm an economist, but a data analyst now. Okay. That explains it. What's the question? Okay, so here's what I would say. The number one thing that informs their compensation is tradition, is what they're currently paying people, right? Every decision or revision to their compensation for any of the roles that they have in their organization is going to be a tweak to what they've done in the past, right? It's a relative thing. Should it go up? Should it go down? By how much? You know, the thing is, compensation is a bit weird because you can't get a lot of information about it, right? The only thing you can get is when people pay their taxes, right? And companies are no different. They have to disclose to the government, this is how many people I employ. This is who they are. They're currently employed. This is how much they make, right? So that goes to the government. And the government, what it does is it takes that information and it publishes. I'm sure you know all this if you're an economist. They publish it in a different form. They make sure that you can't identify individual people or individual companies, but they essentially gather all that data together and then publish it in terms of statistics that anyone can access. So for example, you could look up on the government website, if you're in France or you're Canada and the United States, you can look up like, okay, in this industry, in this state or country or region, how many companies are there in this industry? And it will say, and then you can say how on average, how many employees work per company? And it will say this many. And you can say on average, how much money do those people make? And it will say this much. So you can't identify like individual jobs or individuals or individual companies because that's like breaching privacy issues. But you can get some general information about like what's going on out there. And you can do some basic math and, divide the money by the company and all get average money made per employee and all this kind of stuff. So you can figure out some things, but it's still far from conclusive when you actually do a job search. The only thing that matters is what they're actually offering for you. And if you suspect that they could go lower, you push for it, and maybe you get it. Maybe it turns out that company could give you that much money. That individual, that manager believes you're worth that much money. Every other company in the industry in your city would have said no, but this one said yes. That's the only thing that matters. You have to look at it on a granular basis, in my opinion. The only thing I would do personally is I would have a general idea of like the basic range, but beyond that, I would go in, I would see what they're offering. If it's your first job in that industry, you're not going to be able to really say or push for anything. If it's your second or third job in that business, in that city, then obviously you've got your previous salaries to work off from, right? Brian Bridges says, when an employer gives a pay range and acknowledges your experience, but come in low, you counter mid and they fold and say they can't afford you. Was that their plan all along and you walk away? Well, it's complicated. I mean, I've done videos on this. In a nutshell, they're always trying to get the lowest price possible. Just like when you go to the store, you're wanting to, if you're looking for a can of baked beans or something, you might go to multiple stores, see what the selling price is in each of the stores, and then pick the one that's the cheapest, right? It's the same product. You're just getting it for as cheap as possible, right? You know that behavior? That's exactly how they behave, because we're all entities in this big capitalist economy, right? That's how people do it. They don't want to overpay for something out of the simple goodness of their heart. They want to get it for cheap, right? More bang for the buck. That's what everybody wants. And companies are no different. So that's what they're trying to do for you. Why would they pay somebody $100,000 to do something that they could get someone to do for $30,000? You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. That's the rule that all this conforms to. And then in turn, when customers buy these companies' products, they also don't want to overpay either. You know what I'm saying? So everybody in the system is adopting that same attitude. This is no different, right? So if you talk salary in a job interview, you lose, because the bottom line is if you give a number, you're dead, because either they eliminate you because it was too high, it wasn't the rock bottom amount, or if you say a low number, then they don't eliminate you, but then you're getting paid nothing, and it doesn't even really make sense to take the job sometimes, right? So whichever way, you're screwed. So the tactic to use is to avoid talking numbers until you get to the offer stage. If you get to the offer stage, that's when you seriously talk what number, Anything up to that point is you try and avoid it, right? So you say it's too soon. I can't say. I mean, how am I supposed to give you a number when I don't even know if you pay benefits? You know what I mean? Like, I have no idea if it's shift work. I have no idea if it's remote work. I mean, am I expected to work holidays? Is it mandatory overtime? I don't know any of this. How do you expect me to give you a realistic number of what I need? That's stupid. I would need to know these things. Right? But no, they're hitting you up for a number. You don't know anything about the job, but they need to know exactly how much you need. That's so stupid, right? Like you give a number and then they tell you, oh, okay, great, you're hired. Now you have to relocate to another country for the job. It's like, so the idea is, it's too soon to say, or you throw the question back like, well, this is an approved position. The salary range has been approved. You guys are posting it and promoting it publicly. So you guys should know what the salary range is. So can I ask what it is? Can I, and then whatever they say, like they say it's this range, you say, works for me. Right? Then they can't eliminate you and you never committed to a low number. If they really, really put the screws to you, the only thing you can really say is give them a wide range. Really low to really high. Both numbers, really the low limit, the high limit, they're a stretch, but they're not ridiculous. They're within reason, right? But pushing it really low to really high. You say, all I can say at this point, at this early stage, is that somewhere in there would be fine. That's all I can tell you right now. If they ask you again, you just repeat that answer. Sorry, like I said, all I can say is this. I mean, that's the best I can do for you. And so the idea is that they can't eliminate you because you didn't say a high number, and yet later, if they do give you an offer, if you get that far, you can ask for a higher number, and you're not going back on anything you said earlier. As I never committed to a low number. I said somewhere in this range. I'm picking something in that range, right? So anyway, in a nutshell, that's kind of how you handle salary negotiation. Hopefully that makes sense. Volpow says Skibidi. Wasn't that like 10 years ago? Brian says, seems like they want steak for hamburger prices. Yeah, exactly the same way you do when you go to the store. Clément says, for the same reason people love the sales. Yeah. And sometimes HR or headhunter doesn't have their word for the salary. What? The management doesn't want to pay the market value. You know, it's like going to buy a car, like from a dealership. Somebody mentioned that like early in this chat. You know, it's like exactly the same principle. You know, they want to try and haggle you down, and you want to try and haggle. They want to haggle you up, and you want to haggle them down, right? There's like I mean, Clément, you're an economist. You know, supply and demand, equilibrium. You know, same thing. Their supplier behavior is to push for as high of a price as possible. Consumer behavior is to push for the lowest price possible. I mean, some, you know, chapter 1 of like economics. It's exactly the same thing. This is what's going on. You know, they're playing a game of like, you know, we're trying to get you for cheap, and you're playing a game of you're trying to get as much as they'll possibly pay. You know, and somewhere in the middle, there's an equilibrium. Is it a good idea to Google search the average pay for the role and say that number for your answer? No. Okay. Anyway, it's been 2 hours. It's past the 2 hour mark, so I got to get rolling. But thank you we got 27 people here. You guys are awesome. Thanks for the participation. And, you know, check out my courses. Check out especially this one. You want to learn about how to tap the hidden job market? That shows you, especially if you're an introvert. That's the big source of value there as far as I'm concerned. It covers the posted job market. It's all my advice in one place. But especially if you're looking for a posted job or a hidden job, check that out. Link in the description. I will be back on Wednesday with more live streams. Thanks everyone for participating, especially to Clément and to Alpipal and to Confidocine and a few people that like, you know, really got into it with me today. That's great to see such enthusiastic participation. So you guys take care. Always remember, you're awesome. You're highly employable. You can add a lot of value. And if you're between jobs, it's temporary. Doesn't feel temporary, but it is. You won't even remember this for the rest of your life. You won't remember being in this place, okay? Because you'll be happily employed or you'll be prospering some other way. You're going to be fine. Okay, so wish you all the best. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Take care of yourselves.